The secret surfaced decades after the first disappearance, tucked inside a locked cabinet in a rural Ukrainian police archive, sealed under a faded label, Operation Forest Path. When investigators finally gained access to it in the late 1990s, they expected a simple file from the Soviet era, another cold case buried under bureaucracy. Instead, they found a first hint that the country had unknowingly crossed paths with one of the deadliest serial offenders in modern European history. Inside the folder lay weathered photographs of empty houses, abandoned crossroads, and stretches of snow-covered forest roads. The images looked ordinary, but every one of them appeared on a map in a pattern too precise to be coincidence. Someone had traveled those roads. Someone had chosen those homes. Someone had returned again and again. And worst of all, no one had connected the cases until it was too late. That someone was Anatoly Yurievich Onoprienko, a drifter shaped by neglect, sharpened by resentment, and unleashed by the collapse of a nation. What investigators would learn the following months was so staggering, so devastating, that many officers refused to speak about it even years later. Anatoly's beginnings were marked by abandonment long before he became a specter on Ukraine's backroads. Born in 1959, he lost his mother at 4 years old and was sent to an orphanage after his father relinquished parental rights. His older brother was allowed to stay at home. Anatoly never forgave this. He carried resentment like a wound that never closed, a wound he later claimed shaped everything. People who knew him as a child described him as odd, distant, and quick to anger. Teachers noted he seemed switched off from the world, drifting through school with little attachment to anyone or anything. No one saw a budding killer in him, just a boy who felt unwanted, unseen, and left behind. As an adult, he lived like a ghost. No stable home, no steady job, no real relationships. Just endless drifting through the crumbling edges of post-Soviet society. Ukraine in the early 1990s was a country struggling to build itself in the rubble of its past, police underfunded, records scattered, borders porous, and small towns isolated in ways impossible to imagine today. In that chaos, people vanished quietly, and for years, no one noticed a pattern. The first real insight into Anatoly's mind came from the letters he wrote shortly before his final arrest, letters that revealed a bizarre and contradictory worldview, part resentment, part self-importance, part fatalistic belief that he had been chosen for a mission that no one else could understand. He blamed the world for his childhood. He blamed the government for his poverty. He blamed society for his emptiness. He seemed to believe he had earned the right to settle scores, though his victims were strangers, families who had never heard his name. The handwritten notes investigators found his belongings, short, bitter, almost clinical, outlined a twisted moral logic he used to justify years of crimes. He wrote of balance, of corruption, of purging what was weak. The words were chilling not for their cruelty, but for their coldness. He believed every act brought him closer to a destiny he invented for himself. The escalation began quietly. Throughout the early 1990s, small rural homes across western Ukraine experienced unexplained tragedies. Some burned. Some were found abandoned. Some families vanished without reason. Locals whispered about thieves, smugglers, or border disputes. Police suspected organized crime, then dismissed the cases due to lack of evidence. Back then, the country kept fragmented paper records. Different towns filed cases separately. Different districts handled investigations alone. No one spoke to each other, and that division gave Anatoly the perfect cover. He traveled from village to village with nothing but a backpack, staying in abandoned houses, sleeping in forests, working odd jobs only long enough to afford transportation before moving on. He studied how people lived, how police responded, how rumors spread. He knew exactly how to disappear. By the time investigators were finally able to reconstruct his movements, the timeline covered dozens of towns over several years, a zigzag trail of destruction masked by the political and economic chaos of a country in transition. The crime that finally opened everything occurred in 1996 near the town of Bratkovichi, the moment investigators would later call the spark. Neighbors reported strange lights one night, and by morning a home was burned, the family missing. Police chalked it up to an accident. But a week later, another home in a nearby village suffered a similar fate. Then another, and another. The pattern was suddenly undeniable. For the first time, the Ukrainian police recognized they were dealing with one offender, someone mobile, ruthless, unpredictable. The Ministry of Internal Affairs formed a special task force. Helicopters scoured forests. Roadblocks were set on highways. Officers slept in their uniforms. Fear spread through the countryside. People locked their doors for the first time in decades. Families slept in shifts. Villages organized night patrols armed with flashlights and farm tools. Yet Anatoly always stayed one step ahead. He changed routes, switched tactics, and avoided anything that could be traced. Police began calling him the Terminator because he appeared unstoppable, a phantom passing through the night, never leaving witnesses behind. But even the careful ones make mistakes. Anatoly's downfall began not with a breakthrough, but with a rumor. A local resident reported seeing a stranger frequently sheltering in abandoned farmhouses. He kept to himself. He carried a heavy weathered coat, and he owned a distinctive bag that villagers swore they'd seen near the sites of burned homes. Police raided an empty farmhouse. Inside, they found scraps of clothing that belonged to one of the missing families. They found newspapers from towns where disappearances had occurred, and they found a list of dates that matched the timeline of unsolved cases. It was the first real evidence tying everything together. Roadblocks were tightened. Border alerts were issued. Undercover officers patrolled bus stations. Weeks later, officers stopped a man carrying a suspiciously packed duffel bag on a rural road. He calmly gave his name, Anatoly Onoprienko. When they checked his bag, they found a weather-stained notebook and a collection of objects belonging to various families reported missing. He didn't resist. He didn't run. He simply said, "You finally found me." During interrogations, Anatoly spoke with a detached calm that left even seasoned investigators shaken. He admitted to far more than they had expected, providing detailed timelines, explaining how he selected remote homes and exploited poor communication between towns. He claimed he acted on voices, on destiny, on rage that never stopped growing. Whether those claims were delusions, excuses, or manipulations, no one could say with certainty. Psychologists who evaluated him described his emotional state as void. No remorse, no empathy, no human warmth, just a hollowed-out man who had spent decades drifting, powered by anger he never learned to control. The investigation took over a year and expanded into one of the largest criminal inquiries in post-Soviet history. When the case finally reached court, the public reaction was explosive. Families demanded answers. Villages demanded justice. Newspapers called him the monster no one saw coming. He was convicted on dozens of charges, the maximum the court could legally prove. The number he implied was far higher. Ukraine abolished the death penalty shortly after his sentencing. Anatoly remained in prison until his death in 2013. But the aftermath was not closure. Not even close. Because even today, investigators whisper the same haunting question. How did he escape detection for so long? Was it the chaos of a collapsing nation? Was it bureaucratic failure? Or was it something far colder? The simple truth that people rarely look for darkness in places they consider peaceful? Avery, one of the lead analysts, later said in an interview, the terror wasn't just what he did. It was how easily he moved, how easily he hid, how easily he blended in. And that final realization lingers, heavy and unresolved. If one man could walk through decades unseen, how many others, in other countries, in other forgotten corners of the world, slipped through the same cracks? A question without comfort, a question without an ending, a question that, still today, no one can fully answer.